The hikers smelled it before they saw it. Even with the cool April morning air, the odor was unmistakable. When the coroner arrived, dental records confirmed what seemed impossible. This was Emily Rhodes, the woman who had already been dead for a year. But her body told a different story. This is the story of how a desperate plan became a death sentence. This is the insurance game. Daniel and Emily Rhodes were drowning, not in water, but in debt. They lived in a modest split-level home outside Columbus, Ohio. Daniel owned a small auto repair shop that barely broke even. Emily worked 12-hour shifts as an ER nurse, coming home exhausted, her scrubs still smelling like antiseptic. But it wasn't enough. The mortgage was 3 months behind. Credit card interest was eating them alive. Daniel's mother needed nursing care they couldn't afford. Every month, they fell further behind. And every night, the same argument. It was late February when Daniel showed Emily the article. He'd been scrolling through Reddit, one of those true crime forums, and found a post about a woman in Florida who'd faked her own death for insurance money. She'd been caught, of course. But Daniel wasn't interested in how she got caught. He was interested in how much she'd almost gotten away with. "What if we did it right?" he said. Emily laughed, thought he was joking. But Daniel wasn't smiling. Over the next 2 weeks, the idea grew. Late-night conversations became planning sessions. They told themselves it wasn't really fraud, it was survival. They weren't hurting anyone, just beating a system that had already failed them. And slowly, dangerously, they convinced themselves it could work. The plan was simple. Fake Emily's death, collect the life insurance payout, then disappear and start over somewhere far away, somewhere warm, somewhere they could finally breathe. In early March, Daniel applied for a life insurance policy on Emily. $1.2 million, a large amount, but not suspicious for a nurse in her mid-30s with a mortgage and dependents. When the insurance agent asked why he wanted the policy, Daniel looked him straight in the eye and said, "Peace of mind. You never know what could happen." The agent nodded, typed a few notes, and moved on. Daniel walked out of that office knowing he'd just set a trap. What he didn't know was that he'd also set a timer. And eventually, that timer would run out. If you want more stories like this, kindly like, share, and subscribe. Emily Rhodes vanished on April 19th during a weekend hiking trip in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York. According to Daniel, they'd driven up Friday night to camp near Caterskill Falls, one of the tallest waterfalls in New York. It was supposed to be a getaway, a break from the stress. On Saturday morning, they hiked the trail together. But near the top, Daniel said, Emily wanted to get closer to the edge for a photo. He told her to be careful. The rocks were wet. The current was strong. And then she slipped. Daniel's 911 call came in at 11:43 a.m. His voice shook as he told the operator his wife had fallen into the river. He couldn't see her. The water was moving too fast. He needed help. Search and rescue teams arrived within the hour. They combed the riverbanks, sent divers into the water, deployed drones overhead. By Sunday evening, they'd found a few items. Emily's North Face jacket, torn and waterlogged, one hiking boot, her cell phone, shattered on the rocks below, but no body. The search continued for 6 days. Local news covered the story. Daniel gave a tearful interview, begging anyone downstream to keep an eye out. His voice cracked when he said her name. He looked like a man who'd lost everything. On day 7, the search was called off. The lead ranger told Daniel what he already knew. The river was unpredictable. Bodies sometimes got trapped underwater, wedged between rocks, carried miles downstream. It could take weeks, even months, before she surfaced. Daniel nodded, wiped his eyes, and thanked them for trying. 60 days later, a judge declared Emily Rhodes legally dead due to accidental drowning. The death certificate was signed. Daniel posted a memorial on social media with a photo of Emily smiling on a beach from years before. Hundreds of people commented with condolences. And then, quietly, Daniel filed the insurance claim. Everything was going exactly as planned. Emily Rhodes wasn't dead. She was living in a small town called Berea, Kentucky, population 12,000. She'd driven there 2 days before her supposed death, using back roads and paying cash for gas. She checked into a motel under the name Lisa Carter. a name she'd practiced saying in the mirror until it felt real. The plan was to stay invisible. No credit cards, no social media, no slip-ups. She rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment above a hardware store on Main Street. The landlord, an older man named Gene, didn't ask many questions. She paid 3 months up front in cash and told him she was recovering from a bad divorce. He believed her. To the people of Berea, Lisa Carter was quiet, polite, and kept to herself. She worked part-time at a local diner, always took the morning shift, and never stayed for staff drinks. She told coworkers she was saving money to move out west. Nobody suspected a thing. But living a lie is harder than it looks. Emily couldn't call her sister, couldn't check her old email, couldn't even search her own name online without risking a digital trace. Every time a police car drove by, her heart would race. Every time someone looked at her too long, she wondered if they recognized her face, and the loneliness was suffocating. She stayed in touch with Daniel through burner phones, the kind you buy at gas stations and throw away after a month. Every 2 weeks, he'd send money through Western Union under fake names. Every month, he'd remind her to stay patient. "The insurance company is investigating," he'd say. "It's normal, just a few more months." But months turned into 6, then 8, then nearly a year. The payout still hadn't come. No body meant no closure, and no closure meant more questions. Daniel grew frustrated. The investigators wanted more documentation, more proof, more time. Meanwhile, he was still stuck in Ohio, still broke, still playing the grieving widower at his wife's favorite coffee shop. And that's when Daniel started thinking about a different solution, a permanent one. 342 days after Emily Rhodes disappeared, Daniel finally called with good news. "It's done," he said. "The money's coming through. 1.2 million. We did it." Emily felt something she hadn't felt in months. Relief, hope, the end of the nightmare. Daniel told her they needed to meet one last time before they could leave the country. He'd already booked tickets to Costa Rica under fake names. But first, they had to tie up loose ends, destroy the burner phones, go over the story one more time. He suggested a cabin he'd rented outside Pittsburgh. Remote, private, no cameras. Emily hesitated for just a moment. Something in his voice sounded different, colder. But she pushed the thought away. This was Daniel, her husband, her partner, the man she'd risked everything for. She agreed to meet him. The drive from Kentucky to Pennsylvania took 7 hours. Emily arrived just after sunset on a Friday in late March. The cabin sat at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by dense woods. No neighbors, no lights except the dim glow from inside. Daniel was waiting on the porch. He smiled when he saw her, hugged her tight, told her how much he'd missed her. But his hands were shaking. Inside, he'd set out wine and takeout containers. They sat at the small kitchen table talking about their plans. New names, new lives, beaches and freedom, and finally being able to breathe. Emily started to relax, started to believe it was really over. But then Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression changed. "What's wrong?" Emily asked. "Nothing," he said. "Just the lawyers. Final paperwork." He poured her more wine, kept talking, kept smiling, but Emily noticed he wasn't drinking his. Around midnight, she started feeling dizzy. The room tilted. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. "Daniel?" Her voice sounded far away. He didn't answer. The last thing Emily saw before everything went dark was her husband's face, calm and expressionless, watching her collapse. When she woke, she was in the back of Daniel's truck, her hands zip-tied, duct tape over her mouth. The truck was moving. She could hear gravel crunching under the tires. Her mind raced. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't supposed to happen. Daniel didn't take her to the river. He took her to an old storage unit he'd rented 2 towns over. A 10-by-10 space with a roll-up metal door. He'd paid for 6 months in cash under a fake name. She tried to fight, tried to scream through the tape. But Daniel was stronger, and he'd already made his decision. He looked at her one last time, and for a moment, she thought she saw regret. "You were never supposed to come back," he said, and then he made sure she never would. Daniel had researched decomposition rates obsessively. He knew that without a body showing the right level of decay, the insurance investigators would ask questions. The timeline had to match. Emily had to look like she'd been dead for a year, not a week. So he waited. He kept Emily's body in the storage unit for 28 days. He'd installed 2 space heaters, running them constantly to accelerate decomposition. The heat, combined with the sealed metal space, created the perfect conditions. He visited every 3 days, always at night, always wearing gloves. He'd check the progress, adjust the temperature, make sure no one had noticed the smell. It was methodical, calculated, the kind of thing that required a man to shut off every human instinct he had left. During those 28 days, Daniel lived his normal life. He went to work, had coffee with neighbors, posted on social media about how hard the anniversary of Emily's death had been. No one suspected a thing. He'd also spent that time preparing the site. He scouted Catterskill Falls multiple times, found the exact spot where Emily's belongings had been discovered a year before. He studied the hiking trails, the camera locations, the times when the area was most deserted. And on the 28th day, when he judged the decomposition was sufficient, he made his move. He wrapped Emily's body in a tarp, loaded it into his truck under cover of darkness, and drove to the Catskills. He arrived at 4 a.m. when the park was empty. He carried her down to the river, positioned her between the rocks where the current was strongest, made it look like she'd been trapped there all along. Then he drove home, showered, burned his clothes, and waited for someone to find her. 4 days later, on a Tuesday morning in late April, 2 hikers found a body near Catterskill Falls, the same location where Emily Rhodes had supposedly drowned a year earlier. The smell hit them first. Then they saw her, partially submerged, wedged between 2 large rocks. Police arrived. Crime scene techs photographed everything. The coroner's initial assessment noted significant decomposition, consistent with extended exposure to elements. Dental records came back within hours. Emily Rhodes, 34 years old, reported dead 12 months prior. The discovery seemed to confirm what everyone had believed. Emily had been trapped underwater, caught in the rocks, her body only now released by shifting currents or recent flooding. It happened sometimes. Bodies could stay hidden for months, even years. The news spread quickly. Local outlets ran the story. Daniel gave a brief, emotional statement to reporters. He said he was grateful for closure, heartbroken all over again, but ready to finally lay his wife to rest. And within 72 hours, the insurance company approved the payout. $1.2 million. Daniel had been waiting for this moment for over a year. The money hit his account on a Friday morning. He transferred half of it immediately to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The other half he moved to 3 different banks, spreading it out to avoid suspicion. By Friday afternoon, he was already looking at plane tickets. But 300 miles away in Berea, Kentucky, 2 women were having coffee at a diner and watching the morning news. The screen showed a photo of Emily Rhodes. The anchors talked about the body, the tragic accident, the husband's long wait for closure. One of the women, a regular named Donna, froze mid-sip. "That's Lisa," she said. Her friend looked at the screen. "What?" "The waitress, Lisa Carter. That's her." They stared at the photo. Same face, same smile, no question. But according to the news, Emily Rhodes had just been found dead. Donna pulled out her phone and called the police. Within 24 hours, that call reached the FBI. Special Agent Karen Mbele had been assigned to the Rhodes case from the beginning. Something about the original disappearance never sat right with her. When the body was found, she requested a full autopsy, not just a preliminary identification. The coroner was thorough. He documented decomposition patterns, insect activity, tissue samples, stomach contents, and lividity. And that's when things didn't add up. The external decomposition was extensive, accelerated by heat and moisture. But the internal decomposition told a different story. Organ breakdown, bacterial growth patterns, and bone marrow analysis all pointed to a much shorter timeline. The coroner called Agent Mbele directly. "This body hasn't been dead for a year," he said. "Maybe 6 weeks, 8 at the absolute most." Mbele pulled the case file again. Emily had disappeared in April of the previous year. It was now late April. If the body had only been dead for 6 to 8 weeks, that meant Emily had been alive until at least late February or early March, almost a full year after she supposedly drowned. Mbele started digging. She pulled phone records for Daniel Rhodes and found something interesting: multiple calls to a number registered to a prepaid phone. That phone had been active in Berea, Kentucky for 11 months. She sent agents to Kentucky. Within 48 hours, they'd found Emily's apartment. Her landlord identified her from photos. Her coworkers at the diner confirmed she'd worked there until late March, just weeks before the body was found. Surveillance footage from a local Kroger showed Emily alive and shopping on March 20th. The timeline was clear now. Emily had been alive, living under a false identity, until Daniel killed her in late March. Then he'd kept her body somewhere, letting it decompose, before planting it at Caterskill Falls to make it look like she'd been dead all along. When agents showed up at Daniel's door with an arrest warrant, he was packing a suitcase. He'd already booked a one-way ticket to Costa Rica. Departure, the next morning. Agent Mbele laid out the evidence: the phone records, the surveillance footage, the autopsy results showing heat-accelerated decomposition, and then she showed him the storage unit receipt. They'd found it in his truck, tucked in the glove compartment. A receipt for a 10x10 unit, paid in cash, rented under the name Michael Carson. When they opened that unit, they found the space heaters, the extension cords, trace evidence that would match Emily's DNA. Daniel sat in silence for a long moment. Then he finally spoke. "I needed more time," he said quietly, "for the body to look right, so they wouldn't ask questions. It was all the confession they needed." Daniel Rhodes was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, insurance fraud, conspiracy, and abuse of a corpse. The $1.2 million payout was immediately frozen. Authorities recovered most of the money, though the offshore transfer was tied up in international legal proceedings. At trial, the prosecution painted a chilling picture. This wasn't a crime of passion or a panicked cover-up. This was premeditated murder followed by a month-long waiting period, during which Daniel lived his normal life while his wife's body decomposed in a storage unit. The defense tried to argue that Emily's death had been accidental, that Daniel had panicked and made terrible decisions afterward. But the evidence said otherwise. The sedatives in Emily's system, the zip ties and duct tape, the rented storage unit, the space heaters positioned around her body, the calculated timing of when he planted her at the falls. This was a man who'd turned his wife's murder into a science experiment. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Daniel Rhodes was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge, in her closing remarks, called it one of the most cold-blooded crimes she'd seen in 30 years on the bench. Daniel showed no emotion as the sentence was read. He didn't look at Emily's family in the gallery, didn't apologize, just stared straight ahead, as if already gone. Back in Berea, Kentucky, a small group of people held a memorial for Lisa Carter. They didn't know her real name at first, didn't know about the fraud or the lies or the murder. They just knew her as the quiet woman who worked the morning shift at the diner, who smiled politely, who seemed like she was running from something. When they learned the truth, most were just sad. Emily Rhodes had wanted freedom, wanted escape from debt and stress, and a life that felt like drowning. Instead, she became a victim of the very plan she'd helped create. And Daniel, a man who'd calculated every detail, who'd timed decomposition rates and planned escape routes, learned the one thing he couldn't plan for. That evil leaves evidence, that lies eventually unravel, and that no amount of patience or planning can hide the truth forever. This has been The Insurance Game. Thank you for listening.